Every casino on Earth wants you to believe the house always wins fair and square. But what if we told you that for over 100 years, desperate inventors, mob bosses, crooked dealers, and certified lunatics spent their entire lives building the dumbest, most ridiculous schemes ever designed to rig the odds and rob players completely blind, and almost none of them worked? Stick around because these 111 stories are so unbelievably stupid they will make your jaw hit the floor. And if this sounds like something your friends need to see tonight, hit that subscribe button right now and let the algorithm do the rest. 1. The Chicago mob secretly owned the Las Vegas Stardust Casino for 15 years, and the FBI had absolutely zero clue until a janitor doing his regular shift stumbled upon $10 million stuffed inside a popcorn machine. Not a federal agent, not a detective, just a guy cleaning up popcorn crumbs who accidentally became the most important law enforcement discovery of the entire decade. The mob had been counting millions for 15 straight years, while federal agents wrote reports about nothing. 2. In 1973, a Nevada slot machine was secretly wired to never hit a jackpot because some engineer had soldered the internal chip completely upside down, making it a permanent off switch for winning. The machine sat there looking totally normal, taking quarters from smiling tourists, while being physically incapable of paying a jackpot to anyone. It collected $1.2 million before engineers finally opened it up and found that backwards chip sitting there, like it owned the place. 3. The Binion's Horseshoe Casino installed two-way mirrors above the poker room in 1968, so supervisors could spy on players from above like creepy little owls. And nobody suspected a thing until a ceiling tile gave up on life completely and fell directly onto the supervisor who was up there spying. The man crashed through the ceiling onto the floor below in front of every single player at the table. The cheating was exposed not by investigators but by gravity doing what gravity does best. 4. The United States government secretly ran an illegal craps game inside a 1944 Army base in Nevada, claiming they were studying gambling addiction, which is genuinely one of the most unhinged excuses any government has ever written on official paperwork. Soldiers were gambling. Officers were watching. Everyone was having a great time for 3 full years until a congressional budget audit found the whole operation buried inside a financial report. Congress discovered their own government had been running an illegal dice game and somehow still acted surprised. 5. An MIT engineer in 1981 patented a roulette ball that could be remotely magnetized mid-spin, which sounds incredibly smart until you learn that the casino testing it lost $400,000 in a single night because the magnet also kept attracting the dealer's belt buckle. The dealer spent the entire evening getting yanked toward the roulette wheel like a human paperclip while players watched in total confusion. The invention worked perfectly on the ball and catastrophically on everything else made of metal within 5 feet. 6. A Reno dealer in 1959 secretly filed his fingernails into tiny card-reading sensors so he could mark nearly the entire deck every single day and steal from the casino completely undetected for years, collecting $230,000. His system was flawless until one afternoon a playing card snapped completely in half mid-deal and revealed the grooves he had carved into his fingernails in front of everyone at the table. His entire criminal career ended because a single card had enough and gave up. 7. Atlantic City casinos in 1980 sold guaranteed win bingo cards to senior citizens, which sounds generous until you learn the cards were physically identical to regular ones, except printed in ink colors specifically chosen to make numbers harder for older eyes to read quickly. The seniors were not getting a better card. They were getting the exact same card designed to slow them down, while the casino collected money from people who genuinely believed they had been given a special advantage over everyone else in the room. 8. A 1979 device called the Jackpot Activator was sold to casino cheaters with the bold claim that it could trigger slot machine jackpots using ultrasonic pulses, which sounds futuristic and dangerous. But in reality, the device just produced sounds that made nearby players lose concentration and start betting faster. It did not hack a single machine. It did not trigger a single jackpot. It essentially just annoyed everyone within earshot into making worse financial decisions, which technically still worked, just not in the way the inventor originally advertised. 9. Bally Technologies accidentally shipped 2,000 slot machines in 1966, with a hidden mode that could be triggered by inserting a coin completely sideways into the machine, which is not something any normal person would ever think to try. A Nevada inspector discovered it while bending a coin during an unrelated test, and suddenly every single one of those 2,000 machines became a problem. 2,000 machines. Shipped, distributed, installed on casino floors, all waiting for someone to tilt a quarter at the right angle. 10. New York mob boss Frank Costello secretly co-owned 100 slot machines placed inside Louisiana Bayou candy stores, where children could play them for pennies, earning the scheme $800,000 per year completely tax-free. Children were playing mob slot machines while buying candy. Parents had no idea. The government had no idea. Frank Costello was sitting somewhere in New York counting Bayou pennies that had passed through the hands of children for an entire decade before authorities finally shut the whole operation down in 1950. 11. The 1950 Kefauver Senate hearings blew the roof off Nevada casinos when investigators discovered they were filing hundreds of fictional ghost employees on their payroll to hide mob money inside fake salaries. One casino officially listed 400 workers on paper, but only 60 real human beings had ever actually shown up to work there. Senators sat in those hearings listening to casino owners explain 400 employees while everyone in the room did the math and realized 340 of those people simply did not exist anywhere on Earth. 12. A Chicago inventor in 1967 built a blackjack table with a secret card scanner hidden underneath the felt. Which sounds like criminal genius until you learn that every single time a player wearing a pacemaker sat down, the scanner shorted out completely and triggered emergency calls to local services on 2 completely separate occasions. Ambulances showed up twice. Paramedics rushed in twice. The inventor had successfully built a blackjack table that doubled as an accidental medical emergency device for anyone with a heart condition who simply wanted to play cards. 13. The Dunes Hotel in Las Vegas installed a surveillance camera inside the cash counting room in 1971, specifically to catch employees stealing money. And the idea was completely solid, except nobody checked which direction the monitor was actually facing before switching everything on. The monitor faced the wrong wall the entire time and spent 6 uninterrupted months filming nothing but a coat closet in stunning detail. Employees counted millions of dollars on camera, while the security team watched an empty closet and called it a successful surveillance operation. 14. An Atlantic City dealer in 1982 ran a false shuffle for 8 straight months, never once actually randomizing the deck, just performing the motion while keeping every card exactly where it was, and collecting money from players who had absolutely no idea. He did this successfully through hundreds of shifts until a tourist won 23 blackjacks in a single row, and a math teacher standing in line behind the table looked at those results and immediately called security because the numbers were statistically impossible by any reasonable calculation. 15. Mississippi riverboat casinos in the 1870s sold special VIP tokens to their biggest spenders with a secret twist that made the whole thing genuinely evil. Regular tokens paid out 48% to players, but the exclusive VIP tokens, sold only to high rollers, quietly paid out just 12%. The biggest spenders in the room were receiving the worst odds on the entire boat while believing they had been specially selected for a privilege. The casino was essentially charging wealthy people extra for the honor of losing faster. 16. The 1961 Wire Act was passed specifically to stop casino results from being telegraphed to illegal betting parlors across the country, which sounds like effective legislation until you realize Congress forgot to legally define what the word wire actually meant anywhere inside the bill. That one missing definition created a loophole so wide that phone booths became a completely legal method of transmitting gambling information for an entire decade. Lawyers read the law, looked at phone booths, looked back at the law, and started making very profitable phone calls. 17. IGT slot machines in 1992 had a software bug so perfectly hidden that nobody discovered it for months until players started realizing that pulling the handle twice, within 0.3 of a second, guaranteed a cherry symbol every single time without fail. 14 people quietly figured this out, and between them collected $1.2 million in winnings before the manufacturer was notified and issued an emergency patch. 14 regular people found a glitch in a slot machine and collectively became millionaires before anyone at the company noticed anything unusual happening. 18. Meyer Lansky ran his 1957 Havana casino using weighted dice secretly crafted to land on 7 only 18% of the time instead of the statistically expected 22%. That invisible 4% gap meant absolutely nothing to any individual player rolling the dice, but across thousands of rolls every single night, that tiny invisible difference quietly generated an estimated $3 million per year for Lansky. He did not need a dramatic scheme. He just needed 4% and the patience to let mathematics do all the work silently. 19. An Ohio man in 1977 invented something he genuinely called a luck helmet, which was a construction hard hat fitted with a built-in random number generator light on the front that he believed would enhance a player's chances at casino games through some undefined scientific process he never fully explained to anyone. He wore it into 14 different casinos across the country, attempting to sell it to other gamblers as a fair chance enhancer, and was personally escorted out of every single one of those 14 casinos by security staff who had seen many things but never a luck helmet. 20. The MGM Grand installed facial recognition technology in 1999 to automatically identify known card counters before they could sit down at any table, which seemed like an intelligent modern solution right up until the system flagged 40 tourists as dangerous cheaters within its very first week of operation. Every single flag was a false positive. 0 actual cheaters were identified. 2 of the 40 people wrongly flagged as casino threats were nuns, traveling together on an organized church trip, who had never counted a card in their entire lives. 21. The 1890s New York City policy racket lottery was running one of the most quietly evil operations in gambling history because operators always waited until after ticket sales closed before drawing the winning numbers. They simply checked which numbers received the fewest bets that day and drew those numbers every single time, guaranteeing the smallest possible payout on every single drawing. Players thought they were participating in a random lottery. They were actually participating in a carefully calculated daily math exercise designed entirely to keep their money forever. 22. A 1995 slot machine prototype used palm heat sensors to detect when players were emotionally excited and automatically tighten the payout odds in real time, specifically targeting people who were already having fun. The more thrilled you felt, the worse your odds secretly became, without any visible change on the machine whatsoever. The Nevada Gaming Board reviewed the prototype and rejected it, officially describing it in their written ruling as predatory hardware, which is genuinely one of the most polite ways any government agency has ever said this machine is pure evil. 23. A 1988 poker machine in Laughlin, Nevada, had a truly sinister trick where it would flash a royal flush on the screen for exactly 2 seconds before recalculating and making it disappear as if it never happened, leaving the player staring at a losing hand instead. It showed players the best possible outcome, then immediately snatched it away. Congress investigated it as deliberate psychological manipulation, and they were absolutely correct because some engineer sat down and specifically designed a machine to show people they almost won when they never did. 24. Bugsy Siegel built a secret escape tunnel beneath the floor of his famous Flamingo Hotel Casino in 1946, specifically so mob members could vanish quickly if law enforcement ever showed up, which was genuinely smart planning, except the tunnel flooded completely on opening night and was permanently sealed shut before a single person ever used it for anything. Several guests had their luggage trapped inside the sealed tunnel forever. Bugsy Siegel built the most famous casino in Las Vegas history, and its secret escape route lasted approximately 1 evening. 25. IRS agents conducting a 1983 audit in Reno discovered a casino that had been paying all 300 of its employees entirely in casino chips instead of actual dollars, specifically to avoid payroll taxes, which would have been a clever scheme. Except the chips were not redeemable at any other casino in the city. Workers could only spend their wages at the exact property where they worked. The casino had essentially invented its own private currency and convinced 300 employees to accept it as a legitimate form of compensation for their labor. 26. A 1974 New Jersey man invented something he called a probability enhancer wristband and claimed with complete confidence that wearing it would physically shift quantum luck fields in the wearer's favor during casino games. He sold 4,000 of these wristbands at $80 each to people who genuinely believed quantum physics was operating through their forearm during blackjack. The FTC eventually shut him down, and their official complaint specifically cited fraudulent science claims, meaning the government had to write a formal legal document explaining that luck does not travel through wristbands. 27. The Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas secretly recorded every single phone call made from inside their cash counting room, starting in 1969, believing this gave them internal security, which was a reasonable idea, right up until the FBI subpoenaed those tapes and discovered the executives had been narrating their own skimming operation out loud on recorded phone calls for years. They had accidentally created the most detailed audio confession in casino history. Federal prosecutors did not need investigators or witnesses. They just needed to press play and let the tape speak. 28. Chicago punchboard gambling cards in the 1930s were sold in stores as fun novelty games where customers punched holes to find prizes, but the winning holes were always physically placed at the very bottom of every single board. Mathematically, the winning spot was guaranteed to be the absolute last hole any customer would ever punch, meaning players had to buy their way through the entire board before reaching the prize. Operators sold the illusion of random chance while engineering a product where winning required purchasing every single losing outcome first. 29. In 1984, a Puerto Rico casino installed slot machines containing a phantom fourth reel that was completely invisible to anyone playing the machine. Players saw 3 reels spinning and believed those 3 reels determined everything. But hidden inside the machine's calculations, a secret fourth reel was silently running and could cancel a jackpot mid-calculation without triggering any error message or causing any visible change on the screen. Players celebrated lining up jackpot symbols, while a reel they never knew existed had already quietly decided they were not winning anything. 30. The Kansas City mob in 1970 secretly owned the laundry contract for the Tropicana Casino, which sounds like a perfectly boring business arrangement until you learn they were inflating every single invoice by $40,000 per month, and the FBI raided the operation and found $2.8 million in cash that had been physically sewn inside pillowcases. The mob was hiding millions inside hotel laundry. Agents pulling apart pillowcases found cash instead of cotton. Someone had genuinely spent time sitting there sewing millions of dollars into betting. 31. A Stanford dropout in 2001 built a computer small enough to hide inside a shoe that could predict roulette outcomes by tracking ball speed and wheel rotation. And it actually worked, winning $40,000 before the device malfunctioned during a particularly good winning streak and began delivering 120-volt electric shocks directly to his ankle. The machine worked. The money was real. The shocks were also very real. He had successfully built the world's most profitable and most painful shoe and wore it on a casino floor. 32. Nevada change girl scams in the 1950s involved casino floor workers shortchanging customers by less than $1 on every single cash transaction they processed, which sounds insignificant until you calculate that each worker ran approximately 500 transactions daily, making the invisible theft add up to thousands of dollars every single week without anyone noticing. Nobody reports being shortchanged by 70 cents. Nobody calls security over 50 cents. The entire scheme survived entirely because the amounts stolen were always just small enough that no individual victim ever bothered complaining to anyone. 33. Nevada slot machines in the 1950s were legally permitted to pay out as little as 15 cents for every single dollar a player put in, meaning the house was legally keeping 85% of every bet placed on those machines. Players sat there feeding dollars into machines that were legally entitled to return almost nothing. And this continued for decades until Nevada finally required a minimum 75% payout in 1975. For years before that law existed, walking into a Nevada casino and playing slots was essentially a legal donation program with flashing lights. 34. The 1992 Indian Gaming Regulatory Act contained a loophole so perfectly embarrassing that 14 tribes operated full-functioning casinos for 3 complete years before regulators realized the original application forms had never once required applicants to provide a physical address for their casino. Nobody asked where the building was. The applications were approved for casinos with no listed location. Regulators were approving gambling operations without knowing where those operations physically existed on any map. And this continued happening for 3 years before someone finally looked at the forms and noticed the address field was completely blank. 35. A 1940s Mississippi Delta juke joint ran craps games using a die that had 2 5s printed on it, and no 4 at all, making certain outcomes statistically impossible, while others appeared far more frequently than any honest die should ever produce. The owner operated this game successfully for 6 full years before a traveling salesman with a mathematics degree sat down at the table, noticed the results felt statistically wrong, kept watching, and eventually picked up the die, turned it over in his hands, and found 2 identical 5s staring back at him. 36. Las Vegas junket operators in the 1960s promised high rollers fully comped free trips covering flights, hotels, and meals, but buried mandatory minimum gambling contracts inside the actual airline ticket envelope, where almost nobody ever thought to look before boarding their free flight. Courts later ruled those hidden contracts were completely legally valid, meaning players who thought they were receiving a generous gift were actually signing binding gambling agreements tucked inside an envelope they associated entirely with their complimentary plane ticket and never examined carefully until they were already at the casino. 37. A 2009 inventor filed a patent for a casino chair that would electrically stimulate a player's brain reward center directly through the seat cushion, essentially turning every gambling chair into a device that chemically encouraged players to keep sitting and keep betting through mild electrical stimulation applied to their body without their knowledge or meaningful consent. The Patent Office reviewed this invention carefully and rejected it specifically for violating human subject research protection laws, which means someone actually had to sit down and write an official government document explaining why gambling chairs cannot shock people's brains. 38. Video poker machines in the 1980s ran on a secret 53-card virtual deck instead of the standard 52, meaning an invisible 53rd ghost card existed inside every machine's calculations and could silently appear in any losing hand to prevent a win without ever being shown to the player on screen. Players believed they were playing against a normal deck. They were playing against a deck with an extra card nobody could see. The ghost card never appeared visually. It only appeared mathematically precisely when it needed to make someone lose. 39. The Genovese crime family operated slot machines in Puerto Rico. In 1961, labeled clearly as amusement-only devices that paid out exclusively to the machine operators themselves, and never to any player under any circumstances. Local police accepted $1 per machine per week to officially pretend these machines did not exist or operate in any way that concerned them professionally. The mob paid police $1. Police looked the other direction. Players fed coins into machines that were legally labeled amusement only and received exactly the amount of amusement the label promised. 40. During Prohibition, 312 illegal Chicago gambling dens registered themselves as social clubs and paid annual club dues directly to the city clerk's office, which effectively meant they were legalizing their own bribery through standard municipal paperwork that any legitimate organization would file. The city clerk accepted the dues. The paperwork was filed. The gambling continued. Nobody in the entire city government apparently stopped to question why 312 new social clubs had all registered simultaneously, or why their annual dues payments arrived in suspiciously uniform amounts from suspiciously similar addresses. 41. 2 Caltech physicists in 1955 published a mathematically proven strategy for beating blackjack inside an actual academic journal, thinking they were contributing to science, and Las Vegas casino owners read every single word of it within months and quietly changed their house rules specifically to neutralize the strategy before most players ever heard it existed. 2 brilliant physicists spent years proving their system worked perfectly, and the casinos responded by simply rewriting the rules of the game, making the entire published strategy mathematically useless before the ink was barely dry. 42. Harrah's Casino in Reno outsourced their security camera maintenance to a local television repair shop in 1975, which seemed like a reasonable cost-saving measure until investigators discovered the repairman had installed consumer-grade camera tubes so severely degraded that no human face was identifiable on any footage beyond a distance of 10 feet from the lens. The entire surveillance system was running. Cameras were recording constantly. Tapes were being stored properly. Nobody could identify a single person in any footage because the equipment was essentially producing expensive blurry rectangles. 43. New Orleans mob boss. Carlos Marcello ran dice games on barges moored 3 miles offshore in the Gulf of Mexico from 1946 to 1954. Specifically because that distance placed the barges outside every single state's legal jurisdiction, making them completely ungovernable by any law enforcement agency on land for 8 consecutive years. State police could not board. Federal agents debated authority. Lawyers argued jurisdiction. Meanwhile, Carlos Marcello floated 3 miles offshore collecting money from gamblers, while every agency on the American coastline stood on the beach technically unable to do anything. 44. The Nevada Tax Commission audited Las Vegas casinos in 1956 and discovered that 60% of them were maintaining 2 completely separate sets of accounting forms simultaneously. One set went to the state showing significantly lower revenue numbers, and one set recorded the actual real totals for internal use. Auditors did not find one casino doing this, or 5 casinos doing this. They found 60% of the entire industry operating this way so consistently and so openly that investigators officially named the entire period the double ledger era in their written report. 45. A 1980 Florida inventor patented a special coating designed to be applied to casino craps dice that would reduce bounce randomness and make outcomes more predictable, which sounds useful until every single person who tested the coated dice independently described the physical sensation of touching them as feeling exactly like gum. Sticky gum. The dice felt like gum. Players picked them up and immediately wanted to put them back down. The inventor had successfully created a product that made gambling less random and simultaneously made every craps game feel deeply unpleasant for everyone involved. 46. A blackjack dealer at Caesar's Palace in 1984 had perfected a second deal technique so flawless and so invisible that he passed 11 consecutive official shuffle inspections conducted by trained casino security personnel without anyone detecting anything unusual during any of those examinations. 11 inspections, 0 flags. The technique was only finally caught when a graduate student studying game theory sat at the table analyzing probability deviations in outcomes and built a statistical model proving mathematically that something physically impossible was happening with the cards being dealt from that specific dealer's hands. 47. Nevada's first video keno machines arrived on casino floors in 1981, running on a random number generator that used only a 256 number seed, which sounds technical until you understand it meant the machine's entire sequence of outcomes repeated itself on a perfectly predictable 14-hour cycle. Players who sat down and tracked results long enough discovered the pattern and began betting accordingly. The casino had installed machines they described as random that were actually running on a schedule precise enough that dedicated players could set a watch to it. 48. Tony Spilatro's crew in 1970s. Las Vegas robbed casino cash counting rooms using a method so simple it was almost insulting to the entire security industry. They drilled through shared walls from adjacent hotel rooms and entered counting rooms from inside the building rather than approaching from any exterior entrance that might be monitored. No dramatic heist, no elaborate disguises, no vault cracking. Just a drill and the knowledge that the wall between a regular hotel room and millions of dollars in casino cash was thinner than anyone responsible for security had apparently ever checked. 49. The 1970 RICO Act, which became the most powerful organized crime prosecution tool in American legal history, was structurally modeled on Las Vegas Casino Holding Company layering techniques according to Senate testimony delivered during the bill's drafting process. Lawmakers literally studied how casino corporations hid mob ownership through layers of shell companies and used that exact architecture as the template for a law designed to prosecute organized crime. The mob had accidentally provided Congress with such a thorough education in criminal corporate structure that the government turned their own methods into a weapon against them. 50. A Georgia man in 1993 published and sold a dealer tell-decoder booklet, teaching casino players how to read microscopic facial expressions and body language signals from dealers to predict what cards were coming, and his entire methodology was copied directly from a psychology study conducted on dental students practicing on each other. Not card dealers, dental students. He sold 12,000 copies of a gambling strategy guide built entirely on research about people learning to numb mouths. 12,000 people bought a blackjack system based on dentistry, and nobody asked a single question. 51. Bally's Atlantic City Casino installed an artificial intelligence surveillance system in 2002 designed to automatically flag suspicious betting patterns and protect the casino from advantage players, and it banned 200 people within its very first month of operation. Every single flag was investigated. Every single one turned out to be wrong. Among the 200 people wrongly identified as dangerous casino threats and banned from the property was the casino's own vice president of marketing, who simply enjoyed varying his personal bet sizes when he played on his days off. 52. A 1945 Southern California dealer ran a second car deal scam for 3 full years, stealing consistently from the casino before retiring quietly to Arizona and living a completely normal life for the next 26 years until he published a memoir in 1971, confessing every detail of exactly how he had done it. Authorities read the confession. Investigators reviewed the evidence. Prosecutors examined the case carefully and then officially declined to pursue any charges because the statute of limitations had already expired decades earlier, and the man was free to keep selling his book. 53. A 1966 Nevada patent described slot machines programmed to display jackpot numbers that visibly inflated on screen whenever a player had been sitting and playing uninterrupted for 10 straight minutes, creating the impression of a growing prize worth staying for. The inflating numbers had absolutely no connection to the actual prize pool inside the machine. The jackpot displayed on screen was entirely fictional. Players watched numbers climb higher and higher and felt increasingly motivated to keep playing for a reward that existed only as pixels on a screen and nowhere else in physical reality. 54. Early Bally slot machines used stepper motors that physically drifted 1 to 2 symbol positions when casino floor temperatures exceeded 85 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning that as summer arrived and buildings warmed up, the machines quietly shifted their payout rates without anyone touching the software or adjusting any settings deliberately. Casino payout percentages changed with the seasons. Summer players received different odds than winter players on the exact same machines. Nobody programmed the change. Nobody approved it. The machines just got warm and silently decided to behave differently until the temperature dropped again. 55. A 1988 FBI sting operation in Atlantic City caught 3 casino cage cashiers who had been converting mob cash into casino chips and then converting those chips back into clean casino cashiers' checks, laundering $11 million over 22 months through a method so straightforward it required almost no sophistication whatsoever. The scheme only ended when an undercover federal agent successfully infiltrated the casino cage and watched the entire operation happen in real time from 18 inches away. $11 million cleaned. 2 years of operation. Stopped only because a federal agent got a job. 56. A retired IRS agent published a roulette tracking spreadsheet in 1985 claiming it could identify mechanically biased wheels that favored certain number clusters, and then spent 3 years personally visiting 22 different casinos across the country to test his own system with real money. He lost $184,000 across those 22 casinos methodically and completely proving through his own careful research that his system did not work under any real-world casino conditions. He set out to prove his genius and produced the most expensive self-funded proof of failure in gambling history. 57. Foxwoods Resort Casino opened in 1986. As a functioning gambling establishment welcoming paying customers to its gaming floor and collecting real money from real players for 18 full months before anyone discovered that every single security camera mounted on the gaming floor was a completely non-functional dummy unit purchased entirely from a theatrical prop warehouse. Not one camera recorded a single frame of footage during those 18 months. The entire surveillance system was decorative. Foxwoods operated one of America's largest casinos for a year and a half, protected entirely by the psychological power of fake cameras. 58. A craps dealer in Las Vegas in 1967 had developed a controlled throwing grip so precise that he could land the dice on 6 or 8 roughly 40% of the time, compared to the statistically expected 28%, giving him and any Confederate bettors a significant secret advantage at the table. He worked exclusively at the $500 minimum table for 6 straight months before anyone noticed the statistical deviation in his results. 6 months of controlled throws at the highest stakes table in the room before mathematics finally made enough noise for someone to listen. 59. A 1998 slot machine prototype was built with a 0.02-second audio tone embedded just below the threshold of human hearing, mixed into the coin drop sound, specifically because the manufacturer claimed it activated dopamine responses in players, encouraging longer play sessions. The company voluntarily destroyed every single prototype before regulators arrived to inspect them, which is the kind of decision that answers every question anyone might have had about whether the manufacturer believed their own product was ethical or legal under any existing gaming regulation anywhere in the country. 60. The Detroit Mob ran a 1950s football parlay card operation, where the team matchup descriptions printed on the cards were deliberately written with enough ambiguity that any tied game could be automatically ruled a loss for the bettor under fine print rules that the mob's own personal attorney had carefully drafted. Players thought they understood the rules. The rules had been written specifically to ensure they did not. A tied game meant the bettor lost. The mob's lawyer had turned grammatical ambiguity into a revenue stream and made it hold up in court. 61. The 1931 Nevada Gambling Legalization Bill promised state lawmakers a 25% tax on casino revenue, which would have generated enormous public funding for the state, except the final signed version of the bill set the rate at 0.25% due to a decimal point error that absolutely nobody caught or corrected for 14 consecutive years. The casinos paid almost nothing. The state collected almost nothing. An entire industry operated for over a decade on a tax rate that existed purely because someone misplaced a decimal point. 62. A Louisiana man in 2001 built a roulette strategy device hidden inside a rosary bead frame where pressing each individual bead advanced a concealed mechanical calculator tracking wheel, outcomes, and helping the player determine where to bet next. Casinos immediately banned it under Nevada Regulation 14 as an illegal computing device the moment they discovered what the rosary actually contained. A man walked into a casino holding what appeared to be a religious object and was escorted out because security realized he was actually carrying a mechanical computer disguised as something people pray with. 63. The first biometric hand scanning system installed in a Las Vegas casino in 2001 was specifically designed to identify known card counters by their unique handprint and prevent them from accessing the gaming floor, and it was defeated within its very first operational week by a suspected card counter who simply purchased $12 prosthetic fingertips from a theatrical supply company and wore them over his real fingers, fooling the scanner completely. The casino spent significant money on cutting-edge biometric technology and lost to $12 worth of rubber fingers from a costume shop. 64. Las Vegas casino comp systems in the 2000s calculated player rewards using something internally called theo-loss, which represented how much a player mathematically should have lost based on their betting patterns rather than how much they actually lost during their visit. This meant a player who got lucky and won money received fewer future complimentary offers than a player who lost the identical amount. The casino rewarded losing and quietly penalized winning by building an entire loyalty system designed to make sure the luckiest customers felt the least appreciated every single time. 65. A 1985 patent described a slot machine cabinet constructed from a special aroma, releasing polymer material that would automatically emit a pleasant floral scent, specifically during near-miss outcomes, training players to associate the smell of flowers with almost winning, which is one of the most psychologically calculated things ever submitted to the United States Patent Office. Every single slot machine manufacturer who reviewed the patent called it absurd in their official responses. The Patent Office approved it anyway. A machine that pumped flower smell at losers was considered legally protectable intellectual property. 66. New Jersey video poker machines in 2003 contained a software bug so perfectly hidden that nobody found it until players started reporting something genuinely impossible. If a player was dealt a royal flush and then discarded it. Instead of keeping it, the machine paid the royal flush anyway as a winner, regardless of what the player had chosen to do with the hand. 9 separate players triggered this bug before a software engineer traced the entire problem back to one single, incorrectly named variable sitting in thousands of lines of code. 67. Mob courier Ralph Salerno testified before a Senate committee in 1965 that Las Vegas casino cash was being smuggled internationally, packed tightly inside ordinary shampoo bottles, with each bottle holding approximately $4,000 in carefully rolled bills. The scheme was only physically discovered when one bottle cracked open during a customs inspection, revealing cash instead of shampoo to a very confused customs agent. Someone had spent real-time engineering a cash smuggling operation around shampoo bottles, and it worked flawlessly until the container quality let the entire operation down at the worst possible moment. 68. The Desert Inn Casino in Las Vegas installed surveillance mirrors above the gaming tables in 1979. Specifically so observers positioned above could watch for cheating below, except nobody verified the mirror angles before the system went live, and the mirrors spent 2 full years reflecting the observers' faces back at themselves instead of showing the tables underneath. Cheaters at the tables below were completely invisible to anyone in the observation area for 2 consecutive years. The casino built an entire overhead surveillance system that functioned perfectly as a mirror and completely failed as surveillance. 69. A Las Vegas poker dealer in 1990 marked cards using a tiny pinprick pattern that could only be read through trained fingertip sensitivity developed over years of reading Braille. And he had been a Braille reader his entire life, giving him a tactile skill set that no casino security protocol had ever thought to screen for or consider as a potential cheating vulnerability. He felt his own hidden marks while dealing to himself and players simultaneously. The casino was looking for visual cheating methods while a dealer was reading the deck through his fingertips. 70. A card mechanic known only as the Wrist operated in Nevada in the 1970s and could perform a false cut on a deck of cards 14 consecutive times while leaving the original card order completely and perfectly intact, making the shuffle appear legitimate while changing absolutely nothing about the sequence. Nevada gaming regulators were so alarmed by documented evidence of his technique that the state's mandatory cut card regulation was written directly and specifically in response to what this one man's hands were capable of doing to a standard deck of playing cards. 71. New Jersey mandated automatic shuffle machines at all blackjack tables in 2002, specifically to eliminate the possibility of dealer cheating through false shuffles. And for a brief moment it seemed like a genuinely effective solution, until card players discovered within 6 months that the machines cycled through only 8 repeating shuffle sequences total. 8 sequences. Players memorized all 8. Sharp players began tracking which sequence was active and betting accordingly, turning an anti-cheating device into an unintentional card-counting aid that the state had literally mandated every casino purchase and install on every table. 72. A 1957 Senate subcommittee investigation found that Reno casinos had been submitting falsified dice balance test results to the Nevada Gaming Commission for years, claiming their dice passed fairness inspections when 40% of the actual physical dice being used on casino floors had genuinely failed those exact tests. Only passing results were ever officially recorded or submitted. Failing dice stayed on the tables. The Gaming Commission had been receiving a curated collection of good news for years, while 40% of casino dice were quietly failing tests that players assumed their games depended on. 73. The original surveillance crawl space above the gaming floor at Caesar's Palace in 1966 was constructed so extremely narrow that any observer positioned inside it had to lie completely flat on their stomach to move through it at all. And 2 separate observers fell through the drywall ceiling onto active gaming tables below on 2 separate occasions before the casino permanently abandoned the entire observation system. 2 people fell through the ceiling onto casino tables. The surveillance system designed to catch cheaters from above was eventually defeated by the physical limitations of human bodies in narrow spaces. 74. An Arizona card counter in 1994 sued a Las Vegas casino in court for banning him from their property, argued successfully that his card counting was legal and not cheating. won the case, walked back through the casino doors the same day he won, and was legally banned again 20 minutes after arriving when the casino's legal team rewrote the property's private entry policy, on the spot specifically to exclude him personally. He won in court and lost in the parking lot. The casino lost the lawsuit and immediately invented a new legal reason to remove him anyway. 75. A 1993 patent proposed installing pressure sensors throughout casino floor carpeting to track precisely which spots players stood on longest, and use that standing position data to silently identify serious gamblers and target them with personalized complimentary offers delivered by nearby staff without the player ever realizing they had been identified through their own feet. The system was fully engineered and technically ready for installation. Not a single casino ever chose to install it. The patent exists. The technology worked. Every casino that reviewed it apparently decided that floor sensors, tracking customer feet, was slightly too strange even for them. 76. A 1975 Nevada audit examining 3 Reno casinos discovered they were using roulette wheels with subtly oval-shaped pockets instead of perfectly round ones, and that asymmetry was causing certain number clusters to appear 30% more frequently than a properly manufactured wheel would ever produce. The pit boss at each property had been manually tracking which numbers hit more often using handwritten notes and quietly placing house-side bets on those numbers. The casino was cheating at its own game against its own players using wheels the manufacturing process had accidentally made crooked. 77. Atlantic City Boardwalk. Wheel of Fortune operators in the 1930s installed a hidden foot pedal under the counter connected directly to a brake mechanism on specific wheel segments, allowing the operator to stop the wheel on any section they chose simply by pressing their foot at the right moment. Players watched the wheel spin and believed physics determined where it stopped. The operator watched the wheel spin and decided where it stopped using their left foot. The entire performance of randomness was theater, and the foot pedal was the director making every decision from under the counter. 78. A Nevada casino in 2008 tested a fully robotic card dealing arm, designed to replace human dealers, entirely eliminating the possibility of human cheating from the equation, and the robot dealt cards with complete accuracy and 0 errors. Except it shuffled so extraordinarily slowly that completing a standard 6-player blackjack hand took 22 full minutes from start to finish. The project ran for 1 weekend. Players sat at the table watching a robot arm think about shuffling. The casino canceled the program after 2 days because eliminating human error had also eliminated any reasonable pace of play. 79. The Philadelphia mob in the 1940s ran a numbers racket and secretly owned the radio station that broadcast the winning combinations to listeners each day, giving them complete control over both the betting operation and the announcement of results. On any day when large numbers of people had bet the same combination, the announcer simply skipped that digit entirely during the live broadcast, and nobody at home could prove what had been said or omitted. The mob controlled the lottery and the microphone simultaneously and used both to ensure they never paid out more than was absolutely necessary. 80. An Atlantic City casino in the 1980s banned all baseball caps at gambling tables because management suspected players were hiding electronic earpieces underneath them to receive card information from outside Confederates. And the policy seemed reasonable until a chartered bus, carrying an entire delegation of Little League coaches, arrived at the property for a regional youth sports convention, and every single one of them was wearing a baseball cap. The casino had to choose between enforcing the policy against dozens of confused youth baseball coaches or quietly admitting the ban was slightly broader than originally intended. 81. A 1966 Nevada patent designed slot machine cabinets with built-in resonance chambers specifically engineered to amplify the sound of coins falling into the payout tray so dramatically that a single quarter hitting the metal produced the acoustic impression of 10 coins landing simultaneously. The sound traveled across the casino floor, drawing attention from players at surrounding machines. Nobody was winning more money. The machine was simply engineered to sound like winning was happening constantly and loudly at all times, regardless of what the actual payout numbers said about what was really occurring inside. 82. A Las Vegas casino installed tinted observation glass above the poker room in 2001, allowing staff positioned overhead to see players' hole cards from directly above their shoulders, and the scheme operated undetected until a regular player noticed his opponent across the table consistently re-raised his strongest hands immediately after a specific staff member walked across the overhead walkway. He watched the pattern repeat enough times to be certain it was not coincidence, reported it to gaming authorities, and the entire observation setup was discovered because one player paid closer attention to foot traffic than to his cards. 83. San Francisco gambling halls on the Barbary Coast in the 1850s used a faro dealing box fitted with a hidden internal spring mechanism that held back the top card of the deck, allowing the dealer to silently deliver the second card instead, with no visible hand movement that any player at the table could detect or identify as irregular. Players watched the dealer's hands and saw nothing unusual. The spring did the work invisibly below the surface. The most successful cheating device in Barbary Coast history required no skill from the dealer and left no visible evidence. 84. A Reno casino in 1988 installed slot machines, programmed to play cheerful, upbeat music after every 10 pulls, regardless of whether the player had won or lost anything during those pulls, believing the music would create a positive emotional atmosphere, encouraging longer play sessions. Players found the experience of losing money while cheerful music played directly at them significantly more psychologically unpleasant than losing in silence. The feature lasted 3 weeks before player complaints forced its removal. The casino had accidentally invented a slot machine that made losing feel worse than it naturally already did. 85. A Nevada casino in 1962 installed one-way glass in the restroom directly adjacent to the high roller gambling room and told regulators the surveillance was necessary to monitor for illegal drug activity on the premises. The Nevada Gaming Board reviewed the installation and ruled it an illegal warrantless search of a private space, fined the casino, and ordered the glass removed. The casino had constructed a surveillance bathroom adjacent to where wealthy people gambled, and the government's official position was that watching people in bathrooms required slightly more legal justification than the casino had bothered to obtain. 86. The 1978 New Jersey Casino Control Act required casinos to retain 8 hours of surveillance footage, which seemed like a straightforward security requirement, until investigators discovered that most casinos were recording on magnetic tapes that physically degraded after approximately 50 rewinds, making every single tape recorded after the first month of operation produce nothing but unwatchable static when reviewed. Casinos were technically complying with the retention law by keeping tapes that contained no usable information. Regulators had written a law requiring footage storage without specifying that the stored footage needed to actually show anything when played back. 87. A casino cage worker in Kansas City in 1997 quietly reprogrammed the payout register to automatically round every single cash transaction down by exactly 1 cent, keeping the difference for himself, which sounds trivial, until you calculate that across 4,000 daily transactions, the invisible rounding collected $40 every single day. He ran this scheme undetected for 14 consecutive months, collecting $40 daily, from an institution that processed millions. The casino's accounting system never flagged it. Auditors never noticed. A single cent at a time across 4,000 transactions added up to a very comfortable side income. 88. The 1940s, Chicago horse room wire services transmitted racetrack results to illegal bookmakers across the city using Western Union infrastructure without that company's knowledge or authorization, essentially piggybacking an illegal gambling communications network onto a legitimate telegram service for years. Congress only discovered the full scope of the operation when a Senate aide assigned to investigate suspicious telegram traffic personally followed a Western Union messenger boy on foot through the streets of Chicago and physically traced the delivery route all the way back to the illegal betting parlors receiving the race results. 89. A Las Vegas casino in 2010 tested a fully digital animated dealer displayed on a flat-screen monitor to replace human croupiers at the roulette table and eliminate any possibility of human manipulation of the game, and surveyed players afterward about their experience. 90% of surveyed players said they refused to sit at the digital dealer table, and when asked why, the overwhelming majority explained they trusted a computer screen less than a human being to deal them a fair hand. The casino built a cheat-proof table and players walked away because it felt too honest. 90. A Las Vegas casino owner in 1971 installed scales beneath his craps table, connected to a foot pedal so he could secretly weigh the dice mid-game to detect loaded dice being swapped in by cheating players, which was a genuinely clever security idea, except the scales were so extraordinarily sensitive that a player simply resting their elbow on the table edge triggered constant false weight alerts. The system designed to catch cheaters spent most of its operational life reacting to elbows. Every leaning customer became a false alarm, and the actual cheater detection rate was essentially zero. 91. Nevada casinos in the 1950s operated on a handwritten marker credit system where players signed paper documents. Acknowledging their debts, and cheaters discovered that smudging a single digit on the handwritten form could transform a $1,000 gambling debt into a readable $100 obligation, saving them $900 per visit. The scheme worked successfully across 6 different casinos before state regulators finally mandated standardized printed markers that could not be altered by a wet finger and a few seconds of determined smudging in a dimly lit casino bathroom. 92. A 1930s. Chicago gambling house on South Wabash Avenue ran a rigged roulette wheel controlled by a hidden knee lever tucked beneath the table that allowed the operator to influence where the ball landed, and the entire secret operation was exposed not by investigators or regulators, but because a brand new employee bumped the lever accidentally mid-spin, and the roulette ball visibly reversed direction in front of 20 watching customers simultaneously. 20 people watched a roulette ball change direction mid-spin. The new employee had worked there for approximately 1 afternoon before destroying everything. 93. A 1969 Atlantic City Boardwalk Carnival operator ran a crooked dice game for 11 consecutive years by keeping 2 sets of dice available at all times, swapping loaded dice for fair ones only during any direct challenge or official inspection, and then swapping them straight back the moment the challenge ended. He operated legally for over a decade because no existing law specifically regulated the fairness requirements of dice used in Boardwalk Carnival games. Investigators could not charge him. Regulators could not fine him. The law simply had not thought to mention carnival dice specifically. 94. The Golden Nugget Casino in Las Vegas in 1960 used nearly identical red chip designs for both their $5 and $25 denominations, making the 2 values visually almost indistinguishable under casino floor lighting conditions. Cashiers routinely paid out $5 when customers returned $25 chips, and the error continued until a colorblind player sat down at the cashier window and formally complained that he literally could not tell the chips apart. A colorblind customer accidentally exposed a chip design flaw that sighted cashiers had been making expensive mistakes over for months. 95. Reno casinos in 1950 employed professional gamblers called coolers, whose entire job description consisted of being placed at any table where a customer was on a winning streak and disrupting that player through persistent conversation, deliberate slow play, and calculated psychological interference until the winning stopped. The Nevada Gaming Board confirmed the practice existed in official sworn testimony. Casinos were not just hoping winners would lose. They were dispatching trained professionals specifically assigned to sit next to winners and personally dismantle their momentum through conversation and aggravation until the money came back to the house. 96. A Nevada inventor in 2005 patented a casino table armrest containing a concealed breathalyzer that continuously monitored each seated player's blood alcohol level and automatically signaled the nearest cocktail server to deliver another complimentary drink the moment any player's alcohol reading dropped below a predetermined target threshold. The patent was reviewed, examined, and officially granted by the United States Patent Office. Not one casino ever manufactured or installed the table. Someone legally owns the intellectual property rights to a gambling armrest designed to keep players continuously intoxicated, and that patent is sitting in a government database right now. 97. A 1960 slot machine patent described a hesitation reel mechanism, where the third reel of the machine would visibly slow down as it approached a jackpot symbol, creating the unmistakable impression the machine was about to pay out before the reel continued spinning and past the symbol entirely, leaving the player with nothing. Casino insiders called it the tease for over a decade, as it appeared in machine after machine across Nevada floors. The Nevada Gaming Control Board eventually outlawed the specific mechanism in 1973, after concluding it served no purpose except deliberately torturing players with false hope. 98. The 1903 Saratoga Springs Casino, operated by the legendary Richard Canfield, used a roulette wheel containing the standard 38 numbered pockets, but paid winning bets as though the wheel contained only 36 pockets, collecting the mathematical difference generated by those two phantom pockets on every single spin of every single evening for 4 consecutive years. A Columbia University mathematics professor publicly exposed the discrepancy in print after calculating the statistical impossibility of the house edge players were actually experiencing compared to what a legitimate 38-pocket wheel should mathematically produce for the casino. 99. A Las Vegas casino in 1952 replaced all its standard green felt table surfaces with a newly developed synthetic material that caused playing cards to slide across it approximately 40% faster than they moved across traditional felt. Dealers trained entirely on standard felt could not adjust to the new speed and began consistently misdealing hands at a rate significant enough to slow every game at every affected table. Players complained. Games backed up. Management calculated the cost of the errors against the cost of removing the material, and the synthetic surface was gone within 30 days of installation. 100. The 1976 New Jersey referendum, asking voters whether to legalize casino gambling in Atlantic City, passed with 56% approval, which seemed like a clean Democratic result, until investigators examined the campaign financing and discovered the casino industry had secretly funded 73% of the entire pro-gambling campaign through a carefully constructed network of anonymous corporate donor entities. Regular New Jersey voters thought they were watching a public debate about their community's future. They were actually watching a professionally financed industry marketing campaign designed to look like a spontaneous grassroots movement from concerned local citizens. 101. A Nevada casino in 1964 hired a blind pit boss as a publicity stunt expecting good press coverage, and instead accidentally employed the most effective cheating detector they had ever put on a casino floor. The man could identify crooked dealing by listening to card sounds and feeling table vibrations alone, caught 3 separate dealers in his first 4 months on the job, and was quietly let go by management shortly after they realized his extraordinary sensory abilities were also detecting their own internal skimming operation with equal accuracy and enthusiasm. 102. The Dunes Casino in Las Vegas ran a horse racing results board in 1961, displaying past race outcomes for bettors. And employees were caught erasing completed race results from the board and rewriting different numbers after races had already finished, specifically targeting whichever results had received the fewest bets that morning. They were rewriting history on a chalkboard in real time in front of customers. Players were looking at a results board that displayed outcomes chosen for their financial convenience rather than anything that had actually happened at any racetrack anywhere that day. 103. A Mississippi casino boat operator in 1987 sold lifetime memberships granting unlimited free entry to 3,000 customers at $500 each, collected $1.5 million in membership fees, and then deliberately sank the boat in shallow water, declaring it a complete total loss, which activated an obscure maritime insurance clause that legally voided every single membership sold. 3,000 people paid $500 for lifetime casino access. The operator sank the casino. Maritime law erased the memberships. The boat was gone, the money was gone, and the memberships were legally worth nothing. 104. Nevada gaming regulators in 1969 discovered that a Las Vegas casino had been using a standard deck containing 2 identical queens of spades instead of the correct single queen, and had known about the manufacturing error for 14 months before regulators found out. The casino had chosen not to report the duplicate card because their internal analysis showed it created a marginal house advantage in baccarat. They identified a manufacturing defect that accidentally helped them win more money and made a deliberate business decision to say absolutely nothing to anyone about it for over a year. 105. A Reno casino in 1955 selected its floor carpeting after consulting with designers who specifically recommended a pattern using conflicting geometric lines engineered to cause mild visual disorientation in anyone walking across it. Optometrists later confirmed the pattern genuinely impaired depth perception, making players feel subtly unsteady on their feet. A player who feels slightly unsteady is less likely to stand up confidently and walk toward the exit. The casino had chosen carpet specifically because it made leaving feel physically harder than staying seated, and the science behind that decision was completely and deliberately intentional. 106. The Flamingo Hotel lost $300,000 on its famous opening night in 1946, and post-event accounting revealed the casino had made the catastrophic decision to hire its dealers directly from competing Las Vegas casinos. Those dealers were still secretly loyal to their former employers and spent the entire opening night deliberately dealing loosely and generously to players, ensuring the Flamingo bled money from its very first hour of operation. Bugsy Siegel opened the most anticipated casino in Las Vegas history and staffed it entirely with employees who were working against him from the opening hand. 107. A Nevada casino manager in 1974 attempted to dramatically speed up roulette games by replacing the traditional hand spin with a compressed air mechanism that launched the ball around the wheel using pneumatic pressure, which sounds innovative until you learn the air pressure was wildly inconsistent between launches, and the ball regularly flew completely off the wheel during play. It left the wheel entirely on multiple occasions. On one particularly memorable occasion, the launched ball traveled off the wheel, across the table, and struck a seated player directly in the forehead during what was supposed to be a normal game. 108. The Louisiana Lottery Company, operating in 1898, was the single largest gambling operation in American history. At that point, generating extraordinary revenue across the entire country through mail-order lottery ticket sales until federal investigators discovered the company had been simultaneously bribing every single member of the Louisiana state legislature for over a decade to maintain its operating license and prevent any regulatory interference with its business. Not most legislators, not a majority, every single one. The company had essentially purchased an entire state government and ran it as a business expense for 10 consecutive years. 109. A Reno casino in 1961 attempted to eliminate bottom dealing, cheating by switching from standard rounded playing cards to rectangular ones with sharp 90-degree corners, believing the shape change would make second dealing and bottom dealing physically impossible for any dealer regardless of skill level. Dealers found rectangular cards completely impossible to shuffle smoothly. Every shuffle produced jams, bends, and misaligned stacks. Game speed dropped by 60%. Every single player at every affected table complained within the first hour. The rectangular cards lasted one trial session before the casino quietly ordered standard rounded cards again. 110. Atlantic City casino operators in 1978 discovered their legally mandated player information brochures explaining actual house odds to customers were being read carefully by players who then used the published mathematical information to calculate optimal betting strategies at various games. The casinos responded by lobbying New Jersey regulators and successfully convinced them to remove all specific mathematical content from the required brochures within 1 year of the law taking effect. The government had required casinos to inform players. The casinos informed players. Players used the information. The casinos lobbied to make the information disappear and won. 111. A 1935 Chicago policy gambling operation hired one full-time employee whose complete job description was standing outside the office building every single day, counting how many pedestrians walked past each hour and reporting those foot traffic numbers to management. Operators use the hourly pedestrian counts to dynamically adjust their payout rates throughout the day based on how many potential customers were nearby and how urgently they needed new business that morning. The most sophisticated data-driven decision-making tool available to a 1935 illegal gambling operation was one man standing on a sidewalk counting strangers walking past. And that is 111 real attempts to cheat, steal, and outsmart the casino industry, and almost every single one failed in the absolute dumbest way possible. If any of this made your jaw drop, hit that like button right now, because it helps more people find dumb history and discover that real history is gloriously weird. Subscribe so you never miss another story that makes you question everything, and drop a comment below telling us which one was the dumbest, because we honestly cannot decide ourselves.